Good evening guys! Welcome po sa ating episode ngayong gabi ng Facts First. Ako po si Christian Esguerra. Pasensya na po dahil hindi po tayo nakapag-programa kahapon. May mga nagtatanong po, may mga nag-message sa akin sa Facebook, tinatanong bakit wala. Ang totoong dahilan dyan, nasa biyahe po ako. Bumaba po ako ng Baguio kagabi at medyo inabutan po tayo sa kalye so hindi po tayo nakapag-programa. Anyway, nandito na po tayo at pag-uusapan po natin yung alam niyo po ba, 'di ba, nasa Jakarta, Indonesia ngayon si President Ferdinand Bongbong Marcos Jr. para sa ASEAN Summit. And of course, may mga expectations regarding doon po sa mga issues na mapapag-usapan. Medyo predictable na naman 'yan, no? So, isa sa mga issues na inaasahang pag-uusapan at actually biniring up niya ito nung nakapagpulong siya sa leader ng South Korea, ang kalagayan po ng West Philippine Sea. Yung sigalot pagdating po diyan sa katubigan. Pero mind you, just to put things in perspective, hindi na po disputed yung West Philippine Sea dahil nag-decide na po dyan yung Permanent Court of Arbitration. Tayo po yung merong karapatan, tinatawag na sovereign rights. Pero syempre, from the perspective of China and its many propagandists dito sa Pilipinas, yung mga di umano'y Pilipino, disputed pa rin daw. Hindi po totoo yan. Ang pag-uusapan natin ngayong gabi, meron bang malinaw, malawak, at pangmatagalan na strategy ang Philippine government pagdating po dito sa issue ng West Philippine Sea? Kasi alam niyo po, as far as China is concerned, this is a very long game and China, of course, is known to be patient regarding this issue. Pero how about the Philippines? Baka naman biktima tayo ng ating paparit-parit na administrasyon at baka naman nagpaparit-parit din yung ating strategy. Kumbaga nakadikit lagi doon sa volatility ng ating political system or leadership yung ating approach dito sa West Philippine Sea. Makakausap po natin ngayong gabi, isa pong security analyst at isa rin po siyang professor ng international studies sa De La Salle University. I'd like to welcome to our program si Professor Renato De Castro. Magandang gabi, Professor. Nice to have you again dito po sa Facts First.
Good evening, Christian. Thank you for inviting me back to your program. It's always a pleasure and honor on my part to engage you in a very interesting conversation in your program.
Salamat, sir. Teka lang, sir, para may konting hangin Meron po bang dyan na nagpapaypay sa...
Meron. Yung
ba-
ventilador, sige, imumove ko.
sige, sir. Baka
Sige,
pwedeng
Okay.
Wait lang Ayan. Para magandang usapan natin. Para walang distraction dito sa ating discussion with Professor Renato De Castro. Ayan. Nandiyan na ulit si Professor De Castro. Okay. Okay, sir. Sige. So ngayon, pag-usapan muna natin yung sinabi ni President Marcos nung dito po sa sa Indonesia, no? So ni-raise niya yung issue sa kanyang pakikipagpulong sa South Korea. Ito yung exact quote niya. Ayan, basahin natin para malinaw. Ayan. Sabi niya, we share concerns on the militarization of reclaimed features, the dangerous use of Coast Guard and maritime militia vessels, and other coercive activities. Tapos binanggit niya, we are equally alarmed by illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing which are being detected. Ang tanong ko po, sir, panimula. By this time, malinaw na po ba na talagang nagkaroon ng shift in terms of tone, in terms of approach, yung kasalukuy administrasyon pagdating po sa issue na ito?
Yes, dramatic yung change. But I cannot say na nangyari yung pagbabago lang sa panahon ni President Marcos. Actually, I've already noticed changes even during the time of the former president.
Toward the end.
But of course, may baggage pa nun nung panahon ni President Duterte. And of course, what was at stake, of course, his reputation. Because he tried to initiate a major effort nung first 5 years niya, to appease China. Then later on, there was a realization na it was not working. A realization that all future Filipino presidents would do, whether we appease China or challenge it, China's approach will be always consistent to pursue its maritime expansion in the South China Sea or West Philippine Sea.
Okay. Tanungin ko po kayo dyan. Yung sinasabi nyo, nagkaroon ng late realization yung Duterte administration na yung appeasement policy nito wasn't working.
Opo.
Talaga po bang late realization yun? Baka naman parang face
Slowly realization.
then naisip
Uh,
ko, hindi po ba ano yan, parang face saving effort na lang? Kasi for the longest time talagang sumipsip sa China.
hindi, pero kasi meron domestic factors, may mga domestic forces that oppose him. One of them, of course, is the military and the Department of National Defense, who has been very cautious, very careful, very wary about President Duterte's trip to China. And of course, President Duterte also had to take into account the public opinion consistently. If you look at the surveys conducted by the social weather stations, then of course Pulse Asia, and interestingly, even the annual survey conducted by the Institute of Southeast Asian Studies in Singapore. So I say Singapore, no, na meron silang annual survey ng mga ASEAN people, no, member states, consistent ang mga Pilipinos. China is the least trusted country.
Yun nga, oo. Eto sir, yung timing yan, why did it take the Duterte administration, you think, that long for this realization? Yung survey na yan, hindi naman yan lumalabas lang toward the end of the administration,
Well,
di
of
ba?
course, it's a matter din ng prestige. He made a dramatic effort in October. Remember when he was in Beijing, when he announced in front of the National People's Congress, I'm
Mm,
separating from the United States, Russia and China, here I come. So
mm.
he was trying, if he had been given, probably if you don't have those domestic forces that oppose him, he could have basically effected that pivot.
So, ibig sabihin,
But even
siya mismo, kung siya ang masusunod, talagang China.
China, anuhin niya. Pero, of course, the domestic opposition was simply so powerful, especially coming from the armed forces of the Philippines.
Oo nga, kasi at least sa AFP malinaw yung polisiya, no? Away from the political aspect. Ito nga po, kaya natin pinag-uusapan yan para din sa, ito
Hindi,
lang.
kasi sila yung
Go,
mga
go ahead, sir.
tao sila yung mga may tao nandun dun sa West Philippine Sea.
Mm.
Nakikita nila yung continuous for example, sa Philippine Air Force, continuous yung threat sa kanila. Pag lumilipad sila doon, tapos may mga cases din, of course, yung mga efforts to prevent yung resupply sa Ayungin Shoal.
Yes.
As late as 2020, meron ng indications. So I still remember even in 2018, nag-warn na si former President Duterte na kinukontinue pa yung mga build-up dyan. So I don't know if you remember, the former Foreign Secretary, Alan Cayetano, came out with the three red lines.
Yeah, I remember that. Isa rin yung
So,
Scarborough Shoal.
Scarborough Shoal, if China would conduct unilateral exploration, if the Chinese would, initiate any efforts against the armed forces of the Philippines. And remember, no, as uh, early as December 2018, despite the appeasement policy of President Rodrigo Duterte, the Department of National Defense under former Secretary Delpin Lorenzana was seeking for a seeking for a clarification on the Mutual Defense Treaty.
Yeah, I remember
So
that.
yeah, oh. So meron ng mga voices then within the Duterte administration that has been warning the appeasement policy is not simply working. China's
Kasi,
always been consistent with its policy. Whether we appease China or challenge China, China's position will always the same. It's a hardline approach bent, of course, on maritime expansion. Tama yung sinasabi mo. Well, let's not anymore call it a territorial dispute. The term that I use, it's a clear-cut Chinese maritime expansion into the South China Sea. Kasi wala na legal basis eh. Hindi natin dispute yan dahil tama, ginawa ng arbitral ruling. So what we see is naked expansion. What else can we say?
yun nga, napakaganda ng term na ginamit nyo. Kanina kasi, nung nilalatag ko yung premise dito sa discussion natin, I was thinking of the consistency dun sa polisiya na of course, alam natin, nanggagaling at least yung tone from the top, no? So, binabanggit niyo yung panahon ni President Duterte, ang tone from the top pro-China, although meron mga reasonable voices under him. Pero dito kay President Marcos, may nakikita ba kayong mas unified voice?
Solid ang lalo na sa support sa Department of National Defense, sa Department of Foreign Affairs, sa Philippine Coast Guard, sa Armed Forces of the Philippines, and of course, lalo na nanggagaling sa National Task Force on the West Philippine Sea. And of course, this is headed by no less than the National Security Advisor. National Secretary Advisor Anyo, who's been very consistent when it comes to the pursuing. And of course, Secretary Anyo will not give such directive if he's not getting any go signal from the top, no
Oo
less
nga.
than President Marcos.
Actually, gusto kong kantyawan yan sina Secretary Anyo, no? It must it must have been much easier to speak out now against China's bullying kumpara nung panahon ni President Duterte. Kasi knowing these military officials, ano naman yan, di ba? Consistent naman ang position nila dyan. Yun nga lang, if you have a very vocal politician on top of you, para mahirap humirit in short, di ba?
Yes, of course. And you have to follow the civilian authorities. The directing is coming there. Ngayon talagang openly, talagang sinasabi nila all the while we have been very suspicious of the Chinese. Do you remember yung sa Marawi, yung Battle of Marawi, and the Chinese
Tumulong daw.
provided us weapons? The Armed Forces of the Philippines will not use most of them. Not because it's had nothing to do with their suspicion with the Chinese, but makikita nila maapektuhan yung of course yung inventory ng weapons nila.
Oo.
Magkakagulo in terms of yung sa ammunition lang. Na where were they sourcing ammunition? Kasi usually ammunition natin NATO standard. Tapos bibigyan mo ng mga barrel na gawa from originally from Russian Russian standard.
Issue rin po ba dyan yung interoperability?
Yes, lalo na nung when the former President Duterte was asking the Philippine Air Force to acquire yung heavy lift helicopters from Russia. And also even yung submarines from Russia, yung Kilo-class submarines. May issue dyan ng interoperability with your existing assets.
Kaya nabanggit niya, no? So yung military officials natin, of course, naturally, they have to follow civilian authority. Nasa constitution natin yan.
They're very professional. We have to credit them for their being professional.
Anong basa niyo, Professor, dito sa maraming politiko naman yan, no? Parang na-rediscover yung tapang nila. Kumbaga biglang nag-iingay ngayon, biglang kinokondena yung ginagawa ng China as though ngayon lang nangyayari yan, no? But they were very, very, very quiet during the time of President Duterte. Anong basa niyo po dyan?
Hindi, kasi naman yung policy rin ni President Marcos, lalo na doon ginagawa ng National Task Force on the West Philippine Sea, lalo na yung pinupursue ng ating isang patriotic officer ng Philippine Coast Guard, si Commodore J. Tariala.
Yeah.
Na talagang ang policy is of course to expose and oppose of course the Chinese actions. No, there's no point in simply hiding it from the public. Let's tell the public the truth and make the public make a stand regarding this this coercive actions by the Chinese Coast Guard and Chinese maritime militia in the West Philippine Sea. Tsaka isang policy rin, Christian, kaya dumami rin yung mga incidents noon regarding the Philippine Coast Guard and of course yung incidents sa Chinese Coast Guard. I could still remember this when I was conducting lectures. No, the Japanese provided us about 10 multi-purpose patrol craft. Pero during the time the former President Duterte, ang instruction, don't deploy them sa West Philippine Sea. Deploy them elsewhere. No, deploy mo sa Boracay, deploy mo sa Mindanao, but don't deploy them sa West Philippine Sea. I think that changed. And of course, the former president does not want to antagonize the Chinese. So nagbago lang yan nung March 2021 during the Winson Shoal standoff. Na nagkaroon na talaga ng realization, despite efforts of Peace China, suddenly you have those sabi ni then Secretary Delphine Lorenzana, there were about 230 Chinese fishing vessels supposed to have been manned by the Chinese maritime militia. Doon lang. Swarming. Doon lang dineploy ulit yung Coast Guard. And of course, ang policy ngayon ng current administration is as much as possible deploy them in the West Philippine Sea, South China Sea. Even the Philippine Navy, yung mga TC-90s na nakuha natin from Japan, i-operate mo. Pakita mo.
Okay. So clearly, nakikita natin yung mga dapat ginawa ng nakaraang administrasyon, ginagawa ngayon ng current administration. Ngayon, tumbukin po natin yung pinaka-crux ng ating discussion tonight, no? Ang diskarte ng Arroyo administration sa China, iba ng panahon ni Pinoy. Nandun yung pagsampa ng arbitral case against China at nanalo tayo, pero yung resulta lumabas, nung kauupo ni President Duterte, iba yung diskarte ni Duterte, ngayon iba naman yung diskarte ni Marcos Jr. Ang tanong ko, meron ba tayong magkakaroon kaya tayo ng isang consistent policy when it comes to dealing with China? Because you mentioned it also, no? And that's true. China is very, very consistent with its approach regarding this issue. Pero tayo parang biktima tayo ng 6-year revolving door, so to speak.
Meron naman eh. Actually, the first major stand was made during the late President Benigno Aquino III. Siya na yung nag-challenge ng China. Ang pinaka-crucial dyan was the decision to push through with the modernization of the Armed Forces of the Philippines. At
Matagal
least
na yun, diba?
kinuntinyo rin ni President Rodrigo Duterte, and we have to credit him for actually increasing the funding. During the time the late President Benigno Aquino III, although he pushed for the modernization program of the Armed Forces of the Philippines, kulang yung pera. He was very much reluctant to put money where his mouth was. No, titingnan mo lang yung budget doon sa annual budget for the modernization program. Ang target noon was 25 billion every year. Hindi na-achieve yun during the time of the late President Benigno Aquino III. It was only achieved during the first year, 2017, during the time of President Rodrigo Duterte. So at least pagdating sa modernization ng Armed Forces of the Philippines, finand ng Duterte administration. So in a way, yung bold actions ngayon ni President Marcos was also made possible by the fact that President Rodrigo Duterte also increased the budget of the Armed Forces of the Philippines and the Philippine Coast Guard.
I get it. Kumbaga, one thing was a build up to another. Ganun naman dapat
Yes.
every
Ganun
administration.
dapat. At least pagdating sa and I think this should be a policy. Even in the long run, whether yung diplomatic approach natin would be appeasing China or what is important is we develop a credible military capability. Because diplomacy is just a velvet glove that covers the iron fist of the military capability.
I get it, no? Napakaganda ng binabanggit niya, no? Ang old term yata yan, I think binago na yung credible defense posture, yun ang goal natin, no? Iba na yung term ngayon. Pero yun nga, kung naglagak man ng napakalaking pondo yung Duterte administration dyan sa modernization, kung hindi naman sapat yung deployment, for instance, where it mattered the most, baka naman mas ginamit, for instance, elsewhere, I mean, what good did it bring? Diba? Yan ang question ko dyan.
Well, pwede mo masabi na you're buying time before you can have developed these capabilities. No, at least at this point in time, the Philippine Navy has already 3 modern guided missile frigates. 2 we bought brand new. We bought from the Republic of Korea. The other one was donated. At least meron ng core. Tsaka yung mga ships ng Philippine Navy, hindi na museum pieces from the Second World War. No, during the Duterte administration, merong concerted effort yung Navy na i-mothball na yung mga Second World War vintage ships. So at least dapat lang, no? Meron na tayong core of at least ships, no? The 3 frigates, guided missile frigates we acquired from the Republic of Korea, the 3 Hamilton-class cutter, na relatively modern, although they're not missile-capable, but at least they could operate in the exclusive economic zone. Tapos yung darating pa, yung mga armed positions, yung BrahMos and other hardware. Hopefully, of course, ang contribution naman din ni President Marcos, he agreed to fund the third horizon, which is actually very expensive. At isa pang element at least, no, Christian, na consistent din, yung alliance natin sa US. Of course, this was strengthened by President Benigno Aquino III. During the time President Rodrigo Duterte, there was an effort, of course, to gravitate away from the United States. But later on, of course, lalo na nung nangyari sa Marawi, no, nung na-realize na talagang importante pa rin ang US military assistance. And of course, efforts then by former President Donald Trump to engage him, no, personally in a void ng Trump administration to criticize yung human rights issues dito sa Pilipinas. It in a way was able to stabilize the alliance.
Okay. So
Although there wasn't, yeah, okay, continue.
So
Sorry.
may nakikita kayong consistency when it comes to the approach, no? So, of course, from the perspective of the military. Pero from a comprehensive strategy point of view, meron din ba?
Meron na.
For instance,
Nag-start na tayo come out ng national security policy.
yes, oo, pinablish na yan ng National Security Council.
Uh-huh.
Ang point ko, ngayon lang yan, di ba? Kasi nga,
Hindi,
kung ikukumpara
Aquino
natin yung
administration.
yes, sir.
Aquino
Pero
administration.
pareho, yes, pero pareho ba yung wording?
Iba, slowly.
Yun nga
Nagsiship
eh. Nabasa ko yung bago eh.
Bago eh. Kasi at least yung ano ba yung relevance ng national security policy? Probably dapat explain natin sa ano na. Ayan,
Sige,
it
sige.
contains basically how we view the world. Is the world a peaceful place? Is the world characterized by conflict, competition, so forth and so on? So ang importante niya, at least during the time of the Aquino administration, it was already a signal to our people na we could not simply focus on the domestic or internal security issues. There'll come a time that we have to look outside. So, ang development at least kay President Duterte, we came out with a national security policy, then of course the national security strategy. Ang mas maano dyan, national security strategy, because it provides of course the roadmap kung paano ma-achieve yung goal na minention mo sa national security policy mo. If the world is competitive, prone to conflict, then what do we do about it? So at least nakalagsaad na dun sa national security strategy. And I think this current administration will be coming out with a national security strategy by December. But what is important is the people should be made aware of the national security policy. And I think academics like me, analysts, and media personalities like you should educate the public kung ano ba yung relevance ng national security policy. Because in a way, it's a signal from our government that the main security challenge is not anymore domestic. It's already external. And I think the president has been very consistent about this in his speeches. Lalo na ngayon. No, talagang inano niya, ang challenge is of course the South China Sea. Tapos meron pa siyang term na ginamit na I really find, as an academic, I find it very interesting, no? When he used the term hegemon. Probably we have to explain to the people what do you mean by hegemon. I said, my goodness, binasa ba ni President Marcos si Robert Gilpin? Use the term hegemonic, Churif hegemonic stability.
Oo, binan natin yung hegemonic tendencies or designs ng China dito, no?
And China naman, galit na galit. Pag ginamit mo yung, China would often refer to hegemonic as the United States. Pero sinasabi ni Presidente, hindi ang US ang hegemonic, kayo.
Oo, pero ito naman kasi yung hegemony, I also encountered that in the context of media. For instance, ng post-war, diba? Ibig sabihin, how, let's say, the West was trying to control
exercise leadership.
Exercise leadership. Pero parang, pinagbibintangan din naman ng United States na hegemon. Pero dito, ginamit sa China in the context of the South China Sea.
South China Sea, hegemonic.
Okay.
Sana if I be given a chance, I'll use the term expansionist.
Expansionist.
Kasi hegemonic, medyo ano pa yan eh. Hegemonic actually connotes leadership. Leadership could be benign, leadership could be malevolent, pero pag expansionist, talagang diretsuhan, expansionist ka, sinasakop mo yung teritoryo namin eh. Pero I think the president will not be anymore that diplomatic if he uses the term expansionist. So pero for me, as an academic analyst, I use it. China's maritime expansionism, China's expansion. And ano yung pinaka-evidence mo? Tingnan mo yung 9-dash line map o 10-dash line na ngayon. That is what you call expansionism. Sinasakop mo yung malaking pulsyon ng isang karagatan na common to all historically. No country, no empire, no wala pang state no, of course wala pang modern state. No empire had ever controlled the South China Sea since time immemorial. Pero nagawa yung Chinese ang narrative na they have explored it, Chinese navigators has exploited it. Ang sabi ng arbitral ruling, no. Nandun din yung mga descendant, yung mga ancestors natin.
Okay. Ito nga pala, the fact na ginamit ni President Marcos yung term na hegemon, does it signal something to you? Especially given the timing?
Well, very strong yun. Very strong yung timing. Lalo na nagkakaroon na ngayon ng pushback after China came out with this official map with the 10-dash line. So first pushback came from an ASEAN member state that, as tried as much as possible not to criticize China publicly because it adopts, a quiet diplomacy, which the Southeast Asian countries say we're in contrast with the Philippines. The Philippines is very vocal, it's very dramatic. We apply a quiet diplomacy, which of course historically in the past has been effective. But now they're the first one who came out with a very strong statement, and that is Malaysia.
Oo nga, eh. Pero ngayon ba mukhang natutuwa na yung Vietnam tsaka Malaysia sa Pilipinas kasi nung panahon ni President Duterte, especially during the early years, no? I remember kasi kino-cover kay ASEAN nung time na yun. Medyo dismayado sa Pilipinas, di ba? Ngayon ba medyo, uy, buti
Well,
nandito na kayo uli.
and then, maingay kayo. Kayo yung we expect you to be the bad boy against China. I was looking at the faces, especially the face of the Indonesian president when President Marcos was delivering a speech. Kalmadong-kalmado yung mukha niya. No, he's this guy, this president is saying something that we ourselves could not say directly in front of the Chinese.
Correct. Kasi nga, di ba, ang frustration ng kaalyado, yung mga kapitbahay natin, no, na meron ding stake or claim dito sa South China Sea, in particular Vietnam tsaka Malaysia. Di ba yung Vietnam, talagang nakikipagbakbakan niya sa China eh. Ang frustration po nila, di ba, ng panahon ni President Duterte, kayo yung nanalo, bakit kayo yung quiet?
Oo. Pero
Kayo
anyway,
yung may
they were also,
pinakahawakan eh.
natutuwa rin sila sa atin because at least the previous administration filed the case. And they
Yes.
were using the case. Like Malaysia and Indonesia were using the case.
Yun nga.
In, of course, yung exploration nila, yung survey nila, doon sa kanilang continental shelf.
Oo. Yung resources sa ilalim ng dagat, yung kalupaan sa ilalim ng karagatan.
Indonesia declared the waters of the North Natuna Sea. Sabi nila, hindi na dispute ito because of the July 12, 2016 arbitral ruling.
Tsaka di ba, ang biruan niya nung panahon ng nakaraang administrasyon, kasi din sa mga nanonood sa atin po na professor, sa ASEAN meron parang tinatawag dyan na informally China block, no? Yung mga bata ng China.
Well, pero
sa
hindi rin
ASEAN.
sila happy eh. Hindi rin sila happy. They don't want to be put in that position.
Pero
may mga
meron
issues
silang utang na loob eh.
Pero may mga issues din sila sa China. Primarily because how the Chinese behave if they are, let's say, in those countries. And I've seen when I was in one of those countries that we perceive as pro-China, those people there simply couldn't stand the arrogance of the Chinese if they are in those countries. Myanmar. When I was in Myanmar.
Lalo nagre-rebuild nung time na yun, no? Bakit yung mga Chinese investors ba?
No, at that time we were in a conference in the University of Rangoon. There was a Chinese academic who attended, and this Chinese academic acted like, he's really from the Middle Kingdom. He was not interacting with the locals, no? Samantala kami, we were trying to engage them. So I said, oh my goodness, and I saw the faces of the academics in Myanmar. They were not very happy when how this Chinese academic behaved, and they told us the Chinese actually behave this way because the Chinese know that they practically the people in Myanmar or Cambodia or Laos owe them a lot of money, so they're free to act this way.
Grabe. Grabe. Anyway,
katulad nga yung going back to the official map, no? The official map also meron isang island na dinivide na ng Russia and China after so many years of negotiation. An island in the middle of the river. I think it's in the Amur River Basin. In 2004, China and Russia agreed that they would divide the island. But dun sa map, covered yung entire island, kanila. So how do you think the Russians would react? No? Supposed to be friendship that knows no bound, but then your friend would treat you that way.
Tsaka India, galit na galit, no? Pero yun nga, pwede rin kasi ang yan, di ba? Gumawa kayo ng mapa nyo, pero walang sumiseryoso dyan.
Pero ito talaga, it's not only a symbol of Chinese determination to pursue its maritime expansion. In a way, it's also a directive to the Chinese nation, to the People's Liberation Army, to the People's Liberation Army's Navy, and of course to the Chinese militia, and to every ordinary Chinese. This is our goal in terms of our expansion. This is our goal in terms of, we have to understand Chinese grand strategy under President Xi Jinping, the
Ito ba yung
revival of the great Chinese nation.
ito ba yung 100-year ano nila,
No,
marathon?
yung hindi yung term lang na inano ni President Xi Jinping, the rejuvenation of the great Chinese nation. Kasi they never use the term yung marathon. This is a term used by an
The
American,
West.
I forgot his name,
Oo,
yung
oo.
who worked
I
in
have
the
the copy
National
of the book.
Security
Yeah.
Security Council ni President Donald Trump.
Pero
Pero yung
basically
Chinese
that's the idea, 'di ba?
yeah,
Tama?
the idea. 19 by 2049,
Mm.
China will be as powerful as the United States.
So after the Cultural Revolution, 100 years after, yun ang ano nila, yun ang self-imposed deadline, tama ba?
Hindi, yung anniversary
Anniversary,
ng
sorry,
People's Republic,
of China, oo.
1949,
49, yeah.
2049.
Mukha bang mas malapit na sila ron toward that goal?
Mas concern ako, Christian, sa 2027 eh.
Ito ba yung possible invasion?
Possible about in unification with Taiwan eh. Kasi 100th anniversary niyan nung beginning ng Chinese Civil War, 1927. And also the 100th anniversary of the People's Liberation Army when
Yun
it
nga,
was formed in Nanchang.
Total nabanggit niya yan, no? Likely ba talaga yan that they would force the issue by hook or by crook, reunification?
I think so. Kasi ayun yung personal ambition ni President Xi Jinping eh. Kasi President Xi Jinping has this sort of a dual relationship with the late President Mao Zedong. On the one hand, his family was very close to Chairman Mao Zedong kasi priestling sila eh. Kasama yung tatay niya doon sa Yinan base, no? Tsaka yung Long March. Pero at the same time, pinarusahan sila nung Great Proletarian Cultural Revolution. So, ang goal ni President Xi Jinping is to do something that Mao Zedong was not able to accomplish. That is, of course, ending the Chinese Civil War and effecting the unification with Taiwan.
Damay tayo dyan kung sakali.
Talaga, miski
Medyo
kahit
wala
ano man
dito,
sabihin ng mga, I won't call them pro-China, but I call them people who magnify and amplify yung Chinese narrative. We cannot be neutral because simply of geography.
Tama. Ano tayo? Prisoners of geography. To borrow a term.
Tama.
Eto,
Or
sir.
Revenge of Geography kay Robert Kaplan naman. This is a Revenge of Geography.
Eto, sir, sa pagtatapos, banggit niya yan, no? Yung mga China propagandists in the Philippines. I remember, was this 2 months ago? I read an article quoting you na kayo mismo tinawagan ba?
Oo.
Ano nangyari doon? They were reaching out to you for
And
what?
they were asking me to write an article lambasting the Vietnamese. Talk about Vietnam. No way. Sabi nga ng friend ko ni Professor J. Tariala, I'm sorry, si J. Batong Bakal, dalawa yung J na kaibigan ko eh. Si J. Batong Bakal. The Vietnamese had never harassed our Coast Guard vessel. They have never driven away the Filipino-Chinese fishermen. They did construction, but only in the land features that they control. And of course, I could still remember what happened when a suspected Chinese maritime militia rammed and sank a Philippine fishing vessel sa Reed Bank. I think this was in June 2019, and yung Filipino fishermen were rescued by a Vietnamese fishing boat.
You mentioned na you were being asked to write an article lambasting Vietnam. Ito naalala ko lang. No? Kasi siguro 3 weeks ko nang dinidiscuss frequently yung issue ng West Philippine Sea, yung pambubuli ng China dito sa programa. And on August 23, kasi gines ko rin po si Commodore J. Tariela, I think days before. Naalala ko lang ba, binanggit niya Vietnam yung pinapabanatan sa inyo. Nakatanggap ako ng email. Yun din, nakalagay, news tips on the West Philippine Sea. Ganun din, Vietnam yung target. Kumbaga, pinapa-report sa akin na, yan, I think that's the same line, no? Kumbaga, nagre-reach out yung mga propagandists. But I never replied to this. Ayan, meron sila mga pinapalutang na Vietnam, CIA angle. And then, ayan, parang equivalent ng white paper.
Yeah.
Ayan.
To divert the attention that it's actually China that's bent on an expansive claim in the South China Sea.
Yung ganyan ba, napansin nyo ba na mas lumawak ba or mas tumitindi yung Chinese influence operations lately?
Yes, of course. And I suspect because you have a huge amount of money being poured in.
Yung kayo ba, umabot ba kayo sa stage na nag-offer na ng pera sa inyo to write pro-China articles?
Ay, alam naman nila eh. I've been consistent with my views.
Pero nag-reach out pa rin.
Well, nag-reach out. Well, there's no harm in trying. I think from their perspective, everyone has a price.
Oo nga eh. Ito
Mirror
eh.
imaging eh.
Oo.
Mirror imaging.
Ang hirap lang kasi, nga, ito yung gusto ko rin, siguro pabaon po natin sa mga viewers. No? Hindi porke naninindigan ka dun sa ginagawang pambubuli ng China sa West Philippine Sea, hindi ibig sabihin na pro-US ka.
Or
At hindi rin
mouthpiece ka ng Amerikano. Katulad
correct.
yung tinawag yung isang ating patriotic officer ng Philippine Coast Guard
Si Jay
na isang
Cariela.
mouthpiece of the Americans simply because we're opposing the Chinese. Ayun nga kayo ni-raise ni President Marcos eh. Kaya ni-raise niya yung issue nung dinidispute niya yung notion of the strategic competition is affecting the West Philippine Sea. Kasi yun yung narrative ng mga Chinese sa atin. Ever since we filed the case against China sa Permanent Court of Arbitration, ang argument ng mga Chinese, ang claim ng mga Chinese, it's the Americans who basically convinced us, who told us to file that case.
Ilang beses na na-debunk yan eh. Tsaka para bang pinapalabas natin na bobo yung Pilipino na walang sariling
Na
bait.
wala tayong karapatan, na wala tayong paninindigan, wala tayong pag-iisip para i-oppose ang what the Chinese are doing. Kung nakikita mo na yung mga ordinaryong mangingisda, pinapaalis o kinukuha yung best catch nila ng Chinese Coast Guard at pinagmamalaki pa ng Chinese Coast Guard na they're doing their job. As a Filipino, what will you do?
Yung pala, hindi ba to? Kasi nakikita ko rin, si President Marcos, target din siya ng ilang mga kolumnista na mukhang obviously Chinese propagandist, no? Binabanhatan din si President Marcos ngayon, no? Dahil dun sa stand na ginagawa niya ngayon against China. Kung ano-ano rin yung binabato laban sa kanya. And ang tanong ko dito siguro, Professor, gaano ba kalakas itong influence na ito? And is it actually interfering with the way the new administration wants to handle this issue?
Well, of course, katulad nga yung effect nito kay Commodore J. Tariala, ginagawa mo na yung trabaho mo bilang a patriotic member of the uniformed services. Sabay, ina-accuse ka pa na agent ka ng ibang bansa. Pero sabi ko nga, if you believe in what you're doing, you'll just ignore it. You just have to do what is necessary. You have to bite the bullet. That's part of the job. Ako, kung tawagin ako CIA o ano. Pero, dahil nag-aral ako, of course, everyone knows I finished my degree in the United States, no? Pero, just have to do what you're doing. Katulad din nga ng presidente, kaibigang presidente ng Albert De Rosario Institute for International Strategic Studies, si Professor Dean Dumanhit. But we have to do what we have to do.
Pero sir, if I may add something to that, no? Sa panahon ngayon, sa tindi ng disinformation, it's not enough that you are in possession of the truth or you know the truth. Dapat alam mo rin kung paano siya ipalabas at the right place at the right time. Kasi pwedeng confident tayo sa truth. Ang problema, ang galing kumilos ng mga propagandists at maraming naniniwala. I mean,
yes.
That's the sad part, di ba?
Ayan, na talaga. They're trained for that. And and they're paid for that. They have to show their financer that what they're doing is worth it. They're being paid a lot of money.
Yeah, so, they have to earn their keep.
Yeah, they have to earn their keep. Para sa next report nila, meron na naman mas malaki.
Kaya dapat magbantay po sa Manchurian candidate, no? Lalo sa 2028, no? Dapat abangan 'yan.
Well, ayoko na gumamit na term na yan kasi may nabagsagan tayong Manchurian ka pero hindi pala.
Hindi ko maalala.
Oo nga.
hindi nag-register sa utak ko. In the same vein, hindi rin dapat syempre yung kunwari sino man. Alam naman natin ibang mga bansa, 'di ba? Talaga nag-i-invest din naman 'yan quietly, no? Sa mga kandidato sa tingin nilang malakas, 'di ba? At the
Hindi,
same
pero
day,
China
hindi rin
talaga eh. Yung ibang bansa, I don't think so. Kasi may mga legislation na sila eh.
oo,
May
oo, oo,
legislation
tama
sila na
kayo.
does not only apply in their country, it also applies when they deal with other country.
At most, they want a friend.
And they
At
want a
most.
friend. Oh.
Oo. Okay. May mga lumalabas na pangalan dito. Hindi ko babasahin yung mga comment niya.
Wag na lang.
Let's leave it at that. Okay? Sige. Maraming salamat,
Okay.
Professor
Again, thank you very much again, Christian.
Castro.
And regards to your family, especially to your cute little boy.
Salamat, sir. Regards din kay ma'am, no?
Okay.
Sige po.
Okay.
Maraming salamat. Si Professor
Okay.
Renato De Castro. Nakausap
Have
po
a
natin.
great evening.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Si Professor Renato De Castro, nakausap natin pagdating po dito sa issue ng West Philippine Sea. Always a pleasure to speak with him. No? Ganda ng mga perspective niya. Malalalim. But he's able to explain that hindi naman simple terms, no? Pero talaga understandable. No? Yan ang maganda kay Professor De Castro. Maraming salamat sa kanya. Okay. Ano bang gagawin natin? Bukas, okay mawawala. Ang guest po natin si former Senator Franklin Drilon. Ang pag-uusapan po namin, alam niyo kung ano? Yung budget po ng Office of the Vice President. Again, this is nothing personal, hindi natin tinatarget ang kahit sinong politiko. Pero importanteng maunawaan niyo po kung bakit importante na binubusisi yung budget. In particular, di ba, naglabas ng statement si former Senator Drilon na hindi raw tama yung paglagak or pag-transfer ng 125 million ng Office of the Vice President noong 2022 doon sa Office of the Vice President in the form of confidential funds. Mapaliwanag po namin bukas sa discussion kung bakit hindi po tama yon. Kasi pwede kang mag-augment ng isang budget na nandun na. Pero kung walang budget to begin with, wala kang dadagdagan. Okay? Siguro sa marami sa atin, sa mga nanonood, hirap naman sundan niya, masyadong technical. Pera po natin ang pinag-uusapan dito. Okay? So dapat talaga nagtatanong tayo. So I hope manood kayo tomorrow. Si Senator Franklin Drilon po yung guest natin. No? Malaking pera po yung pinag-uusapan dito. Okay. Number 2, bago ko makalimutan, shout out muna kay Grace Arcaina. Okay? Nag-message siya, I think, today. Sabi niya, pa-shoutout din po, Sir Christian, from Vigan City. Yan, taga Ilocos. Oo, si Ma'am Grace Arcaina. Shoutout sa'yo. Salamat po sa madalas na panonood. Maraming salamat po. Okay, tapos ito meron tayong bagong assignment para sa susunod na episode ng ating Facts-Natics Unite, no? Alam niyo po ba yung Facts-Natics Unite? Ito yung ating weekly video kung saan kayo po yung bida, kayo po yung nagsasalita, kayo po yung naglalabas mismo ng inyong opinion. Okay? Kinokolekta lang po natin siya, tapos pinapalabas po natin at the end of the week. Alam niyo po ba yung topic natin? Ang topic po natin, ito. Alam po ba tingin niyo rin sa mga politiko na biglang nagkaboses, parang biglang tumapang, para manindigan dito po sa pambubuling ginagawa ng China? Send us a video. Send us your videos up to 1 minute. Vertical man siya, horizontal. Kayo pong bahala. But you have to avoid yung mga ad hominem, Wag personal, walang character assassination. Huwag niyo sabihin na, mga ano naman yan no? Doon lang po tayo sa issue, Huwag niyo pong gagawin personal. Nakita natin, for instance, diba, sa FIBA game between the Philippines and China, may mga nakasuot pa ng West Philippine Sea. Yan. So, magpadala po kayo ng video nyo. Doon po sa aking Facebook page, no? Mahahanap niyo po 'yon, Christian Esguerra. I-send nyo lang po doon sa sa message section. I-attach nyo po ron yung inyong short video. Again, keep it respectful. Focus on the issue. Don't make it personal. Okay? Ang topic po natin, ano po bang tingin nyo rin sa mga politiko na tila biglang tumapang para manindigan laban sa pambubuli ng China under the current administration? Nung nakaraang administrasyon, puro quiet Diba? Namumulitika lang ba yung mga yan? Okay. Pala, abangan nyo rin, may mga niluluto tayo mga explainers tsaka mga commentaries this week and next week, no? Isa rin yan sa mga pag-uusapan natin. Yung mga politikong biglang tapang. Ang hirap daw ng assignment, sabi ni Harold Khan. Magpadala ka pa rin ng video. Wala ka magagawa. Ayan. Okay. O, tama na, gabi na. Matulog na po kayo. Ay, teka, nagpapabati. Ito, sino to? Emily Vitug. Sir, pabati po sa anak ko. Birthday niya today. Ay, happy birthday sa'yo, May Vitug. Kung ilang taon ka man. Happy birthday sa'yo. Pinapabati ka ng iyong mommy. Ayan, bait-bait naman ni mommy. Ayan. Padala niyo yung video Huwag kayo mahiya Basta again keep it respectful. Ayan. Okay. Sige. Magandang gabi sa inyo. Kita-kita po ulit tayo tomorrow Tapos of course sa Friday. Again, maraming salamat po sa inyong patuloy na pagsuporta dito po sa ating programa. Ako po si Christian Esguerra. Magandang gabi po sa ating lahat.